Hello guys, Croft is here. If Ridley Scott had his way, Ellen Ripley would have been killed off in the very first Alien movie. Yeah, that's right. In a resurfaced interview, Ridley Scott revealed that he originally planned a much darker ending for the 1979 classic. For a strange reason, Ridley Scott has an obsession with human heads and decapitation, which happened to Ash and David and almost happened to Ellen Ripley at the end of Alien. And there's actually a lot more to this story, so let's break it down in order. Initially, Ridley Scott wanted Ripley dead at the end of the movie. Right now, killing off Ellen Ripley, the legendary character played by Sigourney Weaver, seems like complete insanity. However, at that time, the decision would have actually been justified based on traditional horror tropes from the 60s and 70s. During this era, horror films often relied on certain archetypes and narrative devices to create tension and fear. One common horror trope was the death of the main hero or protagonist at the end of the film. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho is a prime example, where the supposed main character Marion Crane is shockingly killed off midway throughout the film. And other examples are Giorgio Romero's Night of the Living Dead, where the hero Ben survives the zombie onslaught only to be tragically killed by rescuers. Or Vertigo of 1958, where Judy tragically dies at the very end. But what's really interesting is that horror movies changed drastically with the introduction of the final girl concept. The final girl is the last woman standing, the one who survives the horrors and defeats the villain. Characters like Laurie Strode in Halloween, Nancy Thompson in A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Sarah Connor in Terminator are celebrated for their resilience and survival instincts. They represent a shift from helpless victims to empowered survivors, a pretty drastic change in horror movie narratives that also coincided with the rise of feminism. But Ellen Ripley in Alien took the final girl concept to a whole new level. Ripley wasn't just a survivor, she was a fighter. Alien, with its claustrophobic setting aboard the Nostromo spaceship and the terrifying xenomorph designed by H.R. Giger, redefined the sci-fi horror genre in a number of ways, which is why this movie is so legendary. Ripley's character broke new ground in cinema in the 80s as a strong, capable woman who faced unimaginable terror, but it might never have happened if Ridley Scott had filmed his ending to Alien. Interestingly, Sigourney Weaver's character name Ripley is oddly similar to the word rip, suggesting that Ridley Scott may have subconsciously primed viewers to expect something to rip Ripley's head off, which is exactly what happens in his original ending. But before delving into details, let's quickly recap the film's current ending. Ripley is the sole survivor, accompanied only by the ship's Cat Jones. She sets the Nostromo to self-destruct and escapes in a small shuttle, seemingly leaving the alien threat behind as the Nostromo explodes. However, just as Ripley is preparing for cryosleep to return to Earth, she realizes the creature has sneaked aboard the shuttle. In another deadly confrontation, Ripley manages to open an airlock, causing the alien to be sucked out. She then shoots it in the chest with a harpoon and incinerates it with the shuttle's engines. This time, the alien is assumed dead, and Ripley survives to fight another day. However, if Ridley Scott filmed his original ending, Ripley would not have survived to appear in Aliens. And the franchise we know today could have been drastically different, if it would even exist at all. So let's break down Ripley's death original ending. In an interview with Entertainment Weekly, Ridley Scott revealed that his original plan for Ripley's fate was to be killed by the xenomorph.
I think she hits the buttons and the alien holds onto the door. She harpoons, it makes no difference. It comes forward and it slams through her mask and rips her head off.
He felt that the idea of the Nostromo blowing up and Ripley escaping in a small shuttle was a flat ending. Instead, Ridley wanted to shock the audiences with a grim twist. Originally, Scott envisioned a scene where, after Ripley discovers the alien on board in the shuttle and hits the button to open the airlock, the alien would hang on. Ripley would harpoon it, but it would make no difference. The alien would then slam through her helmet and rip her head off. But that's not even the most terrifying part. Scott wanted to add an even more chilling touch that would have probably radically changed the entire lore of the xenomorph species. The alien, now alone in the shuttle, would press the buttons on the controls and, mimicking Captain Dallas's voice, say, "I'm signing off." According to Scott, this would have been a very Alfred Hitchcock-like ending, adding a layer of psychological horror to the already terrifying narrative. But what's really unusual is that Fox actually saved Ellen Ripley. When Scott pitched this ending to the studio over the phone, he could feel the tension. In the interview, he said that the first executive arrived within 14 hours from Fox, threatening to fire me on the spot, so we didn't do that. The studio believed that killing off Ripley would not only depress the audience, but also potentially harm the film's rewatchability and future sequels. Ridley Scott is known for his unpredictable behavior and somewhat inconsistent films, which are either hit or miss. But this erratic behavior is probably part of his talent. And although the studio interference usually makes a movie worse, this time it was totally different. If not for the studio, the xenomorph would have torn Ripley's head off. And it seems like Ridley Scott has a weird obsession with decapitation and severed heads, which appears in many of his films, which include Ash's dramatic beheading, the Door decapitating an engineer in Prometheus, the head monuments, and David's subsequent decapitation at the hands of the last surviving engineer. But the same pattern can be seen in Ridley's other works. The movie Canceller features not one, but two of the most grotesque ways to lose your head, while the movie Gladiator presents a memorable arena decapitation that fuels Maximus's rise. Even Ridley's lesser-known works like Black Rain suggests beheading by the Yakuza, and the latest movie Napoleon also features multiple severed heads. It's not a coincidence that decapitation was one of the most severe punishments throughout history because it is viscerally shocking and truly terrifying. Thankfully, the studio's intervention meant that Ripley survived, and this decision proved to be pivotal for the franchise. Ripley's character went on to become one of the most iconic and influential female protagonists in film history. Her journey from a crew member on the Nostromo to a flamethrower-wielding warrior in Aliens cemented her status as a cultural icon. Since Fox executives arrived just 14 hours after Ridley Scott suggested this grim alternate ending, it seems like Fox was determined to preserve Ripley's character. Whether or not it was tied to pushing a feminist agenda, this decision undeniably benefited the franchise and storytelling. Ellen Ripley's survival in Alien not only disrupted the traditional horror trope of women being victims, but it also aligned with the era's growing feminist movement. In Alien, Ripley not only assumes the captain's role aboard the Nostromo, proving that she's more capable and responsible than Captain Dallas, but she's also the one who kills the evil android Ash, defeats the xenomorph, and ultimately destroys the Nostromo, a symbol of corporate exploitative machine and greed. So through these heroic acts, she emerges as the true hero of the story, both morally and physically. In many older horror films, female protagonists who tried to be heroes were often killed off, almost as a punishment for stepping outside conventional gender boundaries. So Alien challenged this pattern by portraying Ripley as independent and strong, yet also having maternal instincts evident in her risking her life to save the cat Jones and then later Newt in Aliens. But at the same time, I actually kinda like the alternate ending and wouldn't mind seeing it because it's just so dark and creepy, especially with the xenomorph imitating Captain Dallas's voice, which would have been truly scary and chilling. It kind of reminds me of one scene in Annihilation where a creature mimics a victim's voice. But since Ripley stayed alive, in 1986 James Cameron elevated the franchise even higher into a blockbuster action realm with Aliens, recasting Ellen Ripley as a fierce action icon, delivering one of the most iconic lines in cinema like "Get away from her, you b****." However, had Ridley Scott's original plan to decapitate Ripley been realized, the character would have never advanced beyond the first film. This alternate ending would have drastically altered cinema's landscape over the following decade. Ripley's evolution from a vulnerable crew member into a protective, compassionate hero, particularly toward Newt, made her uniquely compelling. In many ways, Sigourney Weaver's portrayal also shattered barriers for female leads in sci-fi and action, so that later entries in the franchise, including Prometheus, Covenant, and recent Alien Romulus, are continually measured against Ripley's iconic influence. Ultimately, choosing to spare Ripley's life just shows the power of a single creative decision. And we're really lucky that Ripley didn't fall victim to Ridley's weird obsession with human heads. Thank you guys for watching. What do you think about the original ending for the movie Alien? Would you prefer this alternate ending, or would you like to see it as a deleted scene? Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel for more content. My name is Croft and I'll see you in the next video.